In late 17th century, the Ottomans lost control over Central Europe after the Austrian army marched in the Hungarian lands as a result of the failed Turk siege of Vienna. By 1688, most of the Pannonian Plain and Belgrade was occupied by the Hasburgs as a result of multiple successful battles that pushed the Ottomans back. In 1697, a last major Ottoman attempt to reconquer Hungary was made by Sultan Mustafa II, personally leading the invasion force. In a surprise attack, Habsburg Imperial forces commanded by Prince Eugene of Savoy engaged the Turkish army while it was halfway through crossing the Tisza River at Zenta, 80 miles northwest of Belgrade. After the Battle of Vienna of 1683, a turning point seemed to have been reached in the Ottoman-Habsburg Wars, with Austria and its allies capturing more Ottoman lands. By 1688, Belgrade and most of the Pannonian Plain was occupied by the Habsburgs. But as the war with the French demanded more troops, and the new Grand Vizier reorganized and reinvigorated the Ottoman army, and the success ended, Belgrade was recaptured by the Ottomans in 1690, and the following year's campaign was relatively indecisive, after the Habsburg army failed in the second siege of Belgrade in 1694. Subsequently, the Ottoman army commanded by Sultan Mustafa II won 3 consecutive victories at the Battle of Lugos in 1695, Battle of Ulash in 1696, and Battle of Sennar in 1696, while the Venetians lost Chios in 1695. On April 18, 1697, Mustafa embarked upon his third expedition, planning a massive invasion of Hungary. He left Edirne with a force of 100,000 men. The Sultan took personal command, reaching Belgrade late in the summer. On 11 August, Mustafa gathered a war council the next day. On 18 August, the Ottomans left Belgrade, heading north towards Szeged. On 5 July, in the newly conquered Pannonian Plain of Hungary, Prince Eugene of Savoy, a young French prince of Italian descent, who had distinguished himself greatly in battle, was appointed commander-in-chief by Emperor Leopold. Born in Paris, Eugene was brought up in the court of King Louis XIV of France. Based on the custom that the youngest sons of noble families were destined for the priesthood, the prince was initially prepared for a clerical career, but by the age of 19, he had determined on a military career. Based on his poor physique and bearing, and perhaps due to a scandal involving his mother Olympe, he was rejected by Louis for service in the French Royal Army. Denied a military career in France, Eugene decided to seek service abroad. One of Eugene's brothers, Louis Julius, had entered imperial service the previous year, but he had been immediately killed fighting the Ottoman Empire in 1683. When news of his death reached Paris, Eugene decided to travel to Austria in the hope of taking over his brother's command. It was not an unnatural decision. His cousin, Louis of Baden, was already a leading general in the imperial army, as was a more distant cousin, Maximilian II Emmanuel, Elector of Bavaria. On the night of July 26, 1683, Eugene left Paris and headed east. Years later, in his memoirs, Eugene recalled his early years in France. Some future historians, good or bad, will perhaps take the trouble to enter into the details of my youth, of which I scarcely recollect anything. They will certainly speak of my mother, somewhat too intriguing, driven from the court, exiled from Paris, and suspected, I believe, of sorcery by people who were not themselves very great wizards. They will tell how I was born in France, then left it, my heart swelling with enmity against Louis XIV, who refused me a cavalry company because, said he, I was of too delicate a constitution. That he refused me an abbey because, based on I don't know what ill talks about me or what invented anecdotes from the gallery of Versailles, that I was more shaped for pleasure than for piety. There is not a Huguenot expelled by the revocation of the Edict of Nantes who hated Louis XIV more than I did. Therefore, when Louvois heard of my departure, saying, "So much the better. He will never return into this country again," I swore never to enter it but with arms in my hands. I have kept my word. He actively fought in the Great Turkish War against the Ottomans and in the 9 Years' War against the French armies crossing the Rhine, establishing himself as a dedicated professional soldier. He rose among the ranks, and his passion for the imperial cause made the emperor to promote him to field marshal, gaining the chance to take command. Eugene's army consisted of 70,000 men with roughly 35,000 ready for battle. As the war chest was empty, Eugene borrowed money in order to pay wages and to create a working medical service. He requested that rations, ammunition and equipment be brought up to the level of an army of 50,000. When news arrived that the Sultan and his army had left Belgrade, Eugene decided to gather all his available troops from Upper Hungary and Transylvania and march them towards Petrovaradin on the Danube, upriver from Belgrade. Prince Eugene sent some troops north to Hegyalja to deal with anti-Habsburg Hungarian rebels while he worked on rebuilding the remainder of the army to face the Turks. After the concentration was completed, Eugene's forces numbered about 50,000 to face the Ottomans. The Habsburg army consisted of German, Austrian, Hungarian and Serbian infantry and cavalry forces. Palatine Paul Esterhazy of the Kingdom of Hungary contributed 12,000 soldiers. The Serbian militia, 10,000 men, a majority of whom were cavalry, under the command of Jovan Popovic Tekalija, also joined Eugene's forces. Serb conscripts were part of the coalition, notably Vice Voivode Jovan Monastirlija with his 1,000 infantry and 700 cavalry soldiers. Despite the advice of the Warden of Belgrade, Mkazade Husein Pasha, who proposed attacking Habsburg-held Petrovaradin northwest of Belgrade on the Danube River, Mustafa moved towards Transylvania. The Ottoman army counted on Hungarian Kurik cavalry under the leadership of Imre Thokoli. However, many former Kurik rebels had also joined the Holy League and the call for a crusade. The Sultan and his army crossed the Danube, then made a detour west to capture Tidal Castle at the confluence of the Tisza and the Danube. Finding the castle without a garrison, the Ottomans demolished it. In September, they headed north along the right bank of the Tisza, reaching the vicinity of the village of Zenta on the morning of 11 September. The river Tisza was the last major river barrier before Transylvania. Prince Eugene followed, marching the imperial army south from Petrovaradin, crossed the Tisza river and headed upriver along the east bank. The Ottomans had no idea where the enemy was. On 11 September, the Ottoman army began to ford the river Tisza near Zenta, unaware that the imperial army was nearby. Captain Jovan Popovic Tekalija, commander of the Serbian militia, who was monitoring the advances of the Ottomans, immediately informed Prince Eugene, and a captured Ottoman Pasha was forced to confirm the information. Tekalija then led the imperial army over swamps and bog to the rear of the Turks' encampment. A courier arrived from Vienna carrying peremptory orders from the emperor to act with extreme caution and not risk a general engagement. Not wanting to let the Turks slip across the river under cover of night, Eugene decided to carry on with his plan. 2 hours before sunset, the arrival of the Habsburg army, after a 10-hour forced march, shocked the Ottoman forces, as they were still in the process of crossing the river and did not think that the Christian army could get there so quickly. Sultan Mustafa, his baggage and the artillery were on the Temeshvar bank, while most of the infantry was still with the Grand Vizier on the other bank. As the light began to fall, the entire Habsburg force, with cavalry on each side and the infantry in the middle, launched an all-out assault from the rear, attacking in a crescent-shaped movement against the defensive position of the Ottomans. The left flank of the Imperial Army, commanded by General Guido Starhemberg, penetrated between the Ottoman left and the bridge, trapping them against the river. The army's right wing was under the command of General Sigbert Heister. At the same time, Imperial forces led by Charles Thomas de Vorderment attacked from the front and, after engaging in close-quarter fighting, broke through the trenches surrounding the Ottoman camp. The command of the Turkish cavalry was under Hungarian Imre Thokoli, who also supported the Sultan with some additional Kurik cavalry. The Imperial dragoons of General Starhemberg dismounted and proceeded to the moat, encircling and engaging the Ottoman camp, and soon broke through the Turkish line of defense. Ottoman troops behind the entrenchments retreated in confusion to the bridge, which was now overcrowded, heavily bombarded, and soon collapsed. Thrown into disorder, the trapped Ottoman troops fell into chaos, with thousands falling into the river. Austrian artillery devastated the surviving Ottomans as they tried to escape. The Sultan watched helplessly from the other side before he decided, after ordering the remaining troops to secure the bridge, to abandon his army and retreat. Escorted by a cavalry detachment and accompanied by his tutor and mentor, Sheikh Islam Fezallah Effendi, Mustafa set off for Temeshvar without stopping along the way, taking only what horses could carry. When the Habsburg army reached the far bank, they found that the Sultan had left behind him 87 cannon, 9,000 baggage carts, 6,000 camels and 15,000 oxen. In addition, the Austrians found the Ottoman royal treasure chest containing 3 million piastres and the state seal of Grand Sultan Mustafa II of the Ottoman Empire, which had never been captured by an enemy before. The seal was inscribed with the words Mustafa, son of Memhan, always victorious, and the year of his accession to the throne 1106 of the Hijra 1695 according to the Christian calendar. After the victory, Prince Eugene personally presented the emperor with the pieces that were captured at the Battle of Zenta. In total, 30,000 Turks died, including many of the most senior figures in the Ottoman military administrative establishment. The Grand Vizier was murdered on the battlefield by mutinous Janissaries. In contrast, the Holy League suffered only 429 casualties. The great difference in casualties was partly due to the tactical superiority of the Imperial Army and cannon technology, which, unlike the Ottomans, the Austrians had improved to a great extent. The battle resulted in a spectacular victory for Austria. The main Ottoman army was scattered and the Austrians gained complete freedom of action in Ottoman Bosnia. On 22nd of October, after Eugene mounted a raid with 6,000 cavalry, including Serbian militia of the Sava, Sarajevo was captured. After the Ottomans killed the messengers sent to ask them to surrender, the city was plundered and burned to the ground. After 14 years of war, the battle at Zenta proved to be the catalyst for peace. Within months, mediators of both sides started peace negotiations in Sremski Karlovy under the supervision of English ambassador to Constantinople, William Paget. By the terms of the Treaty of Karlovitz, signed near Belgrade on January 26, 1699, Austria gained control of Hungary except for the Banat of Temesvar and a small area of eastern Slavonian, Transylvania, Croatia and Slavonian. A portion of the returned territories were reintegrated into the Kingdom of Hungary. The rest were organized as separate entities within the Habsburg monarchy, such as the Principality of Transylvania and the military frontier. The Turks kept Belgrade and Serbia. The Sava became the northernmost limit of the Ottoman Empire and Bosnia a border province. The victory ultimately formalized the withdrawal of the Turks from most of Hungary, and the resulting Treaty of Karlovitz marked the end of Ottoman dominance in Europe.